Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. We've got you covered. Traditional league, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Thank you for tuning to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Jeremiah Martinez, and I'm here to give you some fantasy advice on who to pick up on the waiver wire this week. And I will also tell you about some studs and some duds. But first, I think we're going to get into some Monday Night Football action from last night. Of course, we had some kind of disappointing fantasy football performances last night, and we had some solid performances as well. Well, the Vikings did defeat the New York Giants 24-10, but for fantasy purposes, let's get into it. Well, probably the most disappointing performance from last night was probably Odell Beckham Jr., and this was a daunting matchup from the start. Anyways, me personally, I wasn't high on Odell Beckham in this matchup. This was probably the best defense he has faced the entire year, and he was just constantly covered by Xavier Rhodes last night. Xavier Rhodes was a beast last night for the Minnesota defense, and Odell Beckham only had 3 receptions for 23 yards, but he did have 9 targets, so the ball was going to him, but that was a daunting Minnesota Vikings defense there. And starting Shepard, who has emerged as a receiver 3 or flex option for that matter for the Giants, he only had 30 yards, and that is it, on 7 targets. So it was a very disappointing fantasy day for the New York Giants all around. Orleans Darkwood did perform solidly. He had around 10 points last night, having 48 rushing yards and 1 touchdown. So it wasn't really a great game from a fantasy standpoint for the New York Giants there. But for the Minnesota, the defense did put up a solid performance. They did have an interception and a fumble recovery, and then only allowed 10 points. So that was a pretty solid performance from the Vikings defense, even though they had more than 20 points the previous week against the Carolina Panthers. Well, from the Vikings offensive players, Jeremy McKinnon did have a pretty solid day. He had a pretty solid day, 85 yards and 1 touchdown, even though he did get vultured to Matt Asiata there. And Jeremy McKinnon, ever since he became the starter for the Minnesota Vikings, this was his best game, his best fantasy performance so far as a starter. Even though it is his second start, this was pretty good, and I have to feel good if I have McKinnon on my team going forward. Because he only had 18 attempts, but he did have overall 21 touch, and that is great. And he outtouched Matt Asiata, I think 21-6 last night. So I have to feel good about Jeremy McKinnon on my team, and he's the guy that can break easily for a long run at any point in time, especially with this pretty good offensive line here. And I really do like Jeremy McKinnon going forward. Even in a tough game against the Carolina Panthers in Week 3, Jeremy McKinnon only had 45 yards, but I did expect that from him. But against a pretty much a weaker defense in the Giants, this was a great game. Really great game, and I have to feel good about him going forward. And another player that I'm actually really feeling good about moving forward is Kyle Rudolph. Last night, he had 5 receptions for 55 yards and a touchdown on 7 targets. So that was a pretty good game, and he's been a solid fantasy performer since Sam Bradford has been inserted as a starting quarterback. And, Sam Bradford loves them tight ends. He loves them tight ends, people. That's right. So Kyle Rudolph has emerged in the top tight end category there, and he is constantly a red zone target for Sam Bradford. And this is probably his second straight double-digit game, because last week in week 3, he did have a 70 yards per game performance with a touchdown. Last night, he had 55 yards and a touchdown, so he's putting solid numbers as a tight end in your lineup. So he's someone that I have to move forward. I'm feeling good about. But let's move on to a player that was disappointing that I previously mentioned earlier was Odell Beckham Jr. Yes, Odell Beckham Jr. has really not... He's been okay. Let's just say that. He's been really okay. And this was someone that was high on some draft boards. He was a top five pick in some leagues. But he is someone that I think you cannot sit still. And don't get me wrong, this was a very tough matchup for him. But he is someone that you cannot not afford to sit on given weeks. And remember, this was a pretty tough defense that he faced, people. This was a pretty tough defense that he faced. So going by game here for Odell Beckham Jr., he didn't get off to a rockin' hot start. He only had 73 yards in week 1 against the Cowboys. He only had 86 yards against the Saints, which was kind of disappointing for some people. And he did break through, though, with a pretty good game against the Washington Redskins, 121 yards. And last night only had 23. So he has a total of 300 yards, and the targets are there. He has 39 on the season, but the thing about Odell Beckham Jr. that has been really disappointing is no touchdowns. Where are the touchdowns at? And they're not going to him at all. All the touchdowns have been going to either Victor Cruz or Sterling Shepard. None of them have been to OBJ so far. So he has been pretty disappointing, so to speak, due to previous year's performance. But he's someone I would still trust from here on out still. You have to believe in Odell Beckham Jr. here. And he does have a pretty good matchup in Week 5 against the Green Bay Packers on Sunday night. Because remember, the Green Bay Packers got absolutely torched by Marvin Jones for 200 yards. And they got torched the previous week after that. So, I still trust Odell Beckham Jr. moving forward. And then before the Green Bay Packers actually got torched by Stephon Diggs, too, in Week 2. So, that is why Odell Beckham Jr. is someone I would still start in Week 5. Like I said, it's a perfect matchup for Odell Beckham Jr. to get back on track. And after that, Odell Beckham Jr. gets the Baltimore Ravens, who were torched by Michael Crabtree. Michael Crabtree did get 88 yards in that game this past Sunday, but did get 3 touchdowns. And I expect some touchdowns moving forward for Odell Beckham Jr. for the next 2 weeks, because in Week 7, he does have another tough matchup with the Los Angeles Rams. So, Odell Beckham Jr. is someone you guys can trust, people. And I know he's been disappointing this far with no touchdowns, but believe me, he is still a top fantasy wideout, top 5 play week in and week out. You just have to believe in him, people. You got to be patient. Have to believe in him, people. But he is someone, but if you're looking for help in other places, he's someone, if you need receiver help, people, he's someone I would maybe try to buy low. It might be a long shot, but I would try to buy low on Odell Beckham Jr. But it is a long shot, and if you do have somebody, like a position of need for the guy that has Odell Beckham Jr. in your league, like say if the guy in your league needs a running back, and then you have a lot of running backs to give up, but need that receiver to get you over the hump, I think Odell Beckham Jr. can be that guy, and he's somewhat of a buy low candidate for that matter. But I believe in Odell Beckham Jr. moving forward, and he is someone you have to absolutely trust. And I'm loving his next two matchups. So that is the reason why there's no time to worry. There's no time to worry, guys. There was no time to worry. Because remember, Green Bay Packers got torched by Stephon Diggs and Marvin Jones. Imagine what Odell Beckham Jr. can do. A receiver. A better receiver for the past 2 years, that is. And Stephon Diggs and Marvin Jones are not anywhere near to the talent that Odell Beckham Jr. has. So this is a pretty exciting matchup. And if Odell Beckham Jr. doesn't perform in this matchup, then maybe there is some concern to start. There is some concern to start maybe if he doesn't perform in this matchup. But he does have two good matches moving forward. And you just can't lose hope in him yet, guys. Can't lose hope in him yet. But we're going to take our first break here at the Fantasy Football Podcast here. And I'm going to talk about some studs and some duds. And believe me, there were some really great studs. But there was also some really, bad duds. Well, we'll be back here at the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. And we're going to get into some studs and some duds here over week 4. And man, the first guy I have to talk about here, as you know, Julio Jones. Julio Jones, are you freaking kidding me? Are you kidding me? 300 yards in one game? Wow. Wow, man. And for you guys that were playing against Julio Jones, I feel sorry for you guys. I'm so sorry. I'm here to apologize. I am sorry. I feel bad for you. And luckily, I wasn't that guy that played against him. And there were some guys that played against Julio Jones and Matt Ryan. For example, someone that I know that's in a really big money league, he told me yesterday that he was facing against Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. I'm like, man, wow. Oh, wow, did you lose? It's like, no, man. I had Big Ben, and I forgot who else. I forgot the other guy he had too, but he made a 55-point comeback, and I'm like, wow, dude, not many people do that, and I applaud you for winning against that type of production. But Julio Jones he put on the show against the Carolina Panthers. And I'm going to say right now, I didn't think he was going to have this good of a game. He was someone that I said on Friday that he's someone that you have to trust day in and day out. And he's someone that he's someone you don't bench. He's just someone you don't bench at all. And this game is an example why. He had over 300 yards of offense by himself and a touchdown. 36 points. Wow. And don't get me started on Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan, his resurgence continues, and he looks like he's on his way to being the top fantasy quarterback this year. He had over 500 yards of passing yards, that is, and 4 touchdowns. So this Atlanta Falcons offense is something to be reckoned with in fantasy. And don't forget, they still got 2 really good running backs. They got really 2 good running backs over there. Remember, Devontae Freeman has double-digit fantasy performances 2 straight weeks. So he is also someone that could be dangerous moving forward, as well as Tevin Coleman. He gets He had 3 touchdowns against the Saints last week. Even though he didn't have a productive game against the Panthers, he is someone still that you need to have on your roster. But Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, wow, that's all I gotta say. And they are probably on their way to being the top fantasy performers in their respective positions. And you never know. Things can change in a minute. Remember, these 2 guys can be duds week 5. But like I said, they could be duds in week 5 because they are heading to Mile High to play Denver Broncos. So that can be a game where their production level could drop off, but I do expect them to still be a little solid because that's a great defense they're playing against. So I wouldn't be surprised if they were complete duds in week 5 because of their opponent. And week 6, they play the Seattle Seahawks. So that's 2 straight matchups, tough matchups, that I wouldn't get my hopes of a repeat performance. But they do get a nice matchup in week 7 against the San Diego Chargers. So that is a game that I am looking forward to if I have Julio Jones or Matt Ryan in my lineup. But for the next 2 weeks, I wouldn't expect a repeat performance from Julio Jones or Matt Ryan. But let's get into another fantasy stud this week, and that was Le'Veon Bell. He had a heck of a game in his return, guys. Le'Veon Bell came back strong for 144 yards, 34 passing yards, or receiving yards for that matter, for a total of 170 yards, but no touchdowns. But that's still a really great game. A really good game from Le'Veon Bell, and it is. I'm so glad to see Le'Veon Bell back. I'm so glad to see him back, and if you guys have him, he is a top fantasy running back, top 3 for that matter, moving forward. So he is someone that you just cannot bench. I don't care the matchup, you just cannot bench him. And he has the Giants, he has the Dolphins, and he has the Patriots. The next 3 matches for the 8-week bye, so those are really good matchups to start him in. So he is someone that I should probably not talk about even further. We all know what Le'Veon Bell can do. It's just like he just had a great performance against a defense we thought that was good, but happens to be not as good as we thought. And that is the Kansas City Chiefs. But sticking to the AFC West here, Michael Crabtree had a heck of a game. Yes, Michael Crabtree had a heck of a fantasy performance. 88 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Baltimore Ravens. While he looks like he is emerging as the number 1 receiver in this Derek Carr-led Raiders offense. And that is 2 good weeks in a row for Michael Crabtree, because week 3 against the Tennessee Titans, he had 102 yards receiving. And the week before that, he had 31 yards and a touchdown. And the week before that, he had 87 yards. So Crabtree has a total of 37 targets. So the targets are there. And the fact that Amari Cooper is drawing so many double teams, that helps Michael Crabtree's fantasy value right there. And looking forward to the Raiders' upcoming schedule here. They do have the San Diego Chargers this week, which is a great matchup for this Raiders offense. And they have the Kansas City Chiefs. We thought the Chiefs were a good defense, but they just got blown out by the Pittsburgh Steelers, which was an elite offense. But the Chiefs can still play good defense. So I would still play Crabtree in that game because of the potential that Crabtree can do. And he does have Jacksonville in week 7. So he has some pretty nice matchups looking ahead here. But moving on to guys that just haven't performed well this year, I want to talk about Todd Gurley. He's someone I haven't really talked about on this show very much. But he is not putting the numbers that he did last year. And heading into week 1 against the 49ers, we thought he was going to have a big fantasy day. I did too. But he did not. He got contained in that entire game. He did not do anything at all. 47 yards on 17 carries. Yikes. He was held in check. And then against Seattle, you can't really expect too much against that good of a defense either. So we only had 51 yards. Yikes. But he did have a better game in Week 3 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He had 85 yards, but it was on 27 attempts. 27 attempts. That's 3.1 yards a carry. And then the Cardinals, forget about it. He only averaged 1.7, 33 yards for 19 carries. So Todd Gurley is someone that he's someone that looks like he has fallen off a little bit. And maybe that might be because of the offense that the Rams have. Maybe that might be a part of it because remember, Case Keenum is the Rams quarterback, so maybe defenses are game planning against Todd Gurley. They're going to stack the box there a little bit. So maybe that's a part, or is Todd Gurley in a sophomore slump? So I think the trust in Todd Gurley, I don't think it's lost yet. I still think it's too early to call this a slump, and I expect Gurley to, bounce back. He does have the Buffalo Bills this week, who have put on great performances defensively the past couple weeks. And they do have Detroit in Week 6. So, Buffalo Bills matchup I do kind of like because David Johnson had a great game against them in Week 3, even though most of it was in garbage time. Garbage time points are just as good, people. And the Detroit Lions is a great matchup as well because we saw what Jordan Hayward did this past weekend, had over 130 yards. But yeah, I like the next two matchups for Gurley, and he does get the New York Giants Week 7, so he does have 3 good solid matchups moving forward. And if Todd Gurley is still putting up dud numbers by the bye week, then I would say, you know what? This is probably a sophomore slump, and he's probably someone that you probably can't trust moving forward. But it's still too early for that, guys. It's still way too early. And there's 2 guys I want to get into in this segment here. We got 2 quarterbacks. That's Cam Newton and Carson Palmer. Carson Palmer, he was a very valuable fantasy quarterback last season. But this season, I do not know what it is. I do not know. He's just not the same guy. Is that because of the age? Is that because of the offensive line? What is it about Carson Palmer that is not clicking? And he did have a pretty good performance Week 1. He did have a wonderful performance in Week 2, but Week 3 and Week 4, man, he hasn't done anything. Week 3 against the Bills, he threw 4 picks. And then this past Sunday against the Rams, he only had 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He didn't do that well. He barely touched the 15-point. He didn't even touch the 15-point mark. I think he only had 13 points, I believe. But looking forward to the Cardinals' schedule here for Carson Palmer, there is some speculation that he may not play on Thursday because he is in the concussion protocol. So he might miss a very good, enticing matchup against the San Francisco 49ers. So if you have a valuable quarterback backup or need to pick one up, he's someone that you kind of have to move, look at for the majority of this week because he is on a short week. He's playing against the 49ers. So he's someone that I would not get my hopes up in playing. And if you have a valuable backup or if you need to pick someone up, you got to do it this week because Carson Palmer might not play against the 49ers. So he is someone that probably can't be trusted for a couple of weeks because of his play and his concussion issues so far. But Cam Newton is someone that kind of has been a dud for the past couple weeks. He put on kind of a okay performance against the Broncos, but that was a tough matchup. So I kind of expected that. And against the 49ers, that was a great matchup, put up great numbers in that game like we all expected. So I'm like, okay, Cam Newton, he's okay. But against the Vikings, he was completely shut down in that game. He threw 3 picks, only had 1 touchdown, and over 260 yards passing. So he got completely shut out in that game. And against the Falcons, he got shutout in that game as well. He only had 165 yards and 1 touchdown. So he's someone that maybe that I will find hard to trust moving forward. And he's also a quarterback that's in the concussion protocol. So last year's MVP, he's still someone that you can possibly trust moving forward. And he does get the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he gets the Saints. So those are two really good matchups. And I do expect Cam Newton to bounce back this season. And I don't expect him to put up duds like this all season long. He's someone that you still have to trust. He's someone that you still have to start. And I still trust Cam Newton. I still trust him. But those are my studs and duds for the week. And when we take our second break here at the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, I will tell you top waiver wire pickups for week 5 here when we come back at the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. And we're going to get into some waiver wire pickups you need on your team for week 5. And there is some good ones out there. But most notably, we got to talk about the Baltimore Ravens backfield, and it looks like we have a clear-cut starter there, people. This was one of the avoidable backfields in fantasy so far, but there has been an emerging player to be the starter, and that is Terrence West. Terrence West, he was named the starter Saturday for Sunday's game against the Oakland Raiders, and he did really well. He had 117 rushing yards and a touchdown. So he is someone that he is a top waiver wire pickup moving forward, and he has the potential to be a top 5 running back. He has that much potential. So it's gonna be interesting to see how many touches West has this season. Because remember, Kenneth Dixon is coming back this week. He is off a knee injury. He is a rookie, so we don't know how many touches Kenneth Dixon is going to get. And Javaris Allen did get some work against the Raiders on Sunday. But I do think the fact that Terrence West put on a really good performance, I think the coaching staff of the Ravens are more confident in the running game with West leading it. So I do see he is a really good, valuable RB2 moving forward. And he's someone that you need to get on your team this week. He's going to be the top waiver wire pickup this week. And if you have a top waiver wire spot, this is the guy you need to get, because he could possibly get 20-plus carries every game. And remember how that Baltimore Ravens offense was looking, well, the rushing offense, that is, was looking. It was terrible. But now they found like a guy they look like they believe in. And he is someone that needs to be picked up in all leagues. And don't forget about Dixon. He still offers a plenty of upside, but West, he's someone that should be on your team moving forward. And I was talking about Carson Palmer and Cam Newton earlier, and Carson Palmer is someone that's probably not going to play on Thursday, so he's probably someone that I will look forward into sitting. But if you do need a quarterback this week, look no further than Carson Wentz, people. Carson Wentz, I think he is the top quarterback waiver wire pickup this week. He did have a bye week in week 4, but he's going against a Lions defense that has been shredded, that is banged up. They're banged up, and they already allowed all 4 opposing quarterbacks, that is Andrew Luck, Marcus Mariota, Aaron Rodgers, and Brian Hoyer, to throw multiple touchdowns with just 1 interception. So Wentz has not thrown an interception yet, but this is a chance for Carson Wentz to solidify himself as a fantasy starter, and I do think he is a top waiver wire pickup for quarterbacks, especially for someone who has Carson Palmer or needs plain old help at the quarterback position. So he is someone that I will look forward to adding in my lineups this week if you need quarterback help. So for you Carson Palmer owners out there, if you don't have anyone else better as a backup plan, you need to get Carson Wentz as your quarterback this week. And moving on to the wide receiver position, there is a guy that I thought he was absolutely done. He looked like he wasn't going to be the same player, but I was wrong about him, and I'm so glad I was, because Steve Smith put on a great performance against the Oakland Raiders on Sunday, and he's someone that is a valuable weekly starter. I think he needs to be taken seriously now. You know, he still has that connection with Joe Flacco, and it looks like Father Time cannot defeat this guy. And remember, Steve Smith is coming off an Achilles injury, and I think a lot of people wrote him off because of that. But he is someone that needs to be added in all leagues. He had 11 targets last week. He had 8 catches for 87 yards before that. And he's someone that needs to be started in some lineups. And he's someone that I will look forward to having on my team. And he is someone that needs to be picked up right now in all leagues. And I think for the final waiver wire pickup that I really like this week is Hunter Henry, the San Diego Chargers tight end. Yes, I think he is a really good add this week for people that need tight end help. And pretty much I think everyone who don't have Gronkowski, Jimmy Graham right now needs tight end help. And Henry looks like he might play again if Antonio Gates is out this week, and he has a really good matchup against the Oakland Raiders. The Oakland Raiders, they can't stop anybody on defense right now. You know, the Oakland Raiders allowed over 100 yards and a touchdown to Steve Smith, and they did allow really good, solid performances to the Falcons tight ends the week prior. So Hunter Henry is someone I will look forward to adding this week if you need help at the tight end position. And he's done a nice job so far in 2 games. He has 9 catches for 113 yards and a touchdown with 12 targets against the Colts and Saints. So I think he will have a really good week against the Oakland Raiders if Antonio Gates is not available to play. And he's a really good streaming option with Fleener, Kelsey, and Graham on a bye. I really do think so. And those are my top waiver wire pickups of the week, people. And I'd like to thank you guys for tuning into the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. I will be back on Friday with Anthony, the co-host of the show. And you can follow the show on a variety of platforms such as iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and on the website, gsmcpodcast.com. You can also follow the show on Twitter at @GSMC_FFootball and on Instagram at @GSMC_FFootball. And you can also like the show on Facebook at the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. And if you guys have any advice at all or want advice, if you guys want any advice on your teams as well, don't forget to hit us up on the Twitter, people. Hit us up at @GSMC_FFootball. We'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. So I'm Jeremiah Martinez, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, and I will be right back here on Friday.